the meeting to order. This is the February 1st meeting. We'll note that Commissioner Frenzel is absent. All other commissioners are present. First item of business for your consideration is the order of business. Are there any changes to the order of business? Hearing none, would there be a motion to approve the order of business?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Second item then is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckart?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. We have a 5:20 timetable agenda item. We'll move to that, and that's to hear a 2010 census update from Lori Jordan. So welcome, Lori.
Thank you, Commissioners, again for having me. Stark Development Corporation, along with the Dickinson Complete Counts Committee, has been in full force promoting economic development as far as the census is concerned. Mr. Rummel back here just said, "You're everywhere," so I hope that's a good thing. About 2 weeks ago, I met with two representatives from the U.S. Census Bureau out of Bismarck. They asked if they could meet with me. We met for approximately 2.5 hours. They came to Dickinson. They asked me to take them around so they could see the growth areas. They wanted to see the DSU campus, the areas affected by the tornado, any campgrounds or any temporary housing that we have in Dickinson. Their intent was to understand how the census takers would have to approach Dickinson's changes since the last address canvassing back last spring, and I think things went very well. I asked a lot of questions, and they asked a lot of questions back at me. It was a very productive time. One new thing that came up was the homeless shelters, and I did a bunch of phone calls, found out a bunch of contact information for them, called the homeless shelters themselves, and passed that information on to the Census Bureau. They are also trying to establish those Be Counted sites that I talked about last time. The Be Counted sites are a place where an individual can go and pick up a form if they do not receive a form in some way, and they have not been established yet. They're hoping to announce those sites sometime in February, so next time I should be able to announce those sites. My two areas of immediate focus have been university students and the oil industry workers, and new developments at DSU besides the flyers that we put in the bookstore back early January when the students were selling or buying their books. Last week they allowed us to put in some census awareness. There was footballs and basketballs and some megaphones that were popcorn holders at their athletic events, and I heard that they were a very good success. Next Monday, I'm scheduled to present to the Vice President's Council at DSU. That is a meeting of all the department chairs, and I'm going to encourage some type of participation in the classroom as far as census material. And I found a few really good videos that the U.S. Census Bureau website has, specifically on campus students and how they're supposed to be counted, international students and what have you. And I'm going to try to get that so they can have some type of link to the Stark Development website. And every classroom at DSU has a computer and internet access right at the front of the classroom. If they can just click on it in a 3-4 minute presentation, try to reach all of the students. I also met with the director of the Center of Multicultural Affairs, and she will also be at the meeting next Monday, so we'll be able to sit down and have a little more conversation on this. And because this year the individual forms will be given to the students instead of counting them as a group or how many live in the dorms type thing, we really wanted to figure out how this enumeration process is going to be conducted. And I was just given information that the Census Bureau is going to do it a little bit different than you and I. They're going to be doing it within 1 week, the first week of April. They're going to come, distribute forms, have the students fill them out, and collect the forms, all within 1 week. So I think that was good information to know. And the Dickinson Complete Counts Committee is going to try to schedule some type of awareness day, census day, something like that during that week. I also met with Hal Haynes, the Vice President for Student Development at DSU. I got a lot of information about the housing, He also gave me a contact person, the Director of Residential Life, who works with the RAs in the dorms, and we're going to try to have some awareness through the dorms also. As far as oil industry workers, the Dickinson Area Chamber of Commerce is allowing us to put in a census flyer in all the relocation packets. A lot of the oil industry workers moving in town call the chamber for a relocation packet, so we've had a lot of information go out that way. Missouri Basin specifically asked for 150 packets, so that all went to them here a couple weeks ago. I've also established a booth and a present at the upcoming API Gumbo Cook-Off that's coming on February 20th. And the oil industry group, again, is our hardest to count group. It's going to be the hardest one to reach. But we know the Census Bureau on a state level has a little bit better kind of contacts. They've been contacting different state organizations to get where these man camps are and the different locations that the oil industry workers are living. As far as general public awareness, the Dickinson Press online ad is up and running. I encourage you to go and check that out. Stark Development is paying for an ad coming up in the Progress edition of the Dickinson Press. Tomorrow I have the last presentation to the last of all the community service groups, so I have hit them all. Steffes Manufacturing also allowed me to come and do a 10-minute presentation to their 125 staff members here last week, and I thank Steffes Manufacturing for that. The local radio stations have also agreed for us to do a trivia giveaway with them. We have some of the items that were funded, such as t-shirts and can coolers and such things. We're going to do for 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of March, we'll do a trivia giveaway on all the different local radio stations. Both high schools have allowed us to distribute different basketballs, footballs, and megaphones in their next 2 weeks here in some tournaments and events that they're having. Elder Care has also allowed us to distribute 500 flyers through all of their Southwest North Dakota services. And I also spoke with the Badlands Human Services Regional Council, which has representatives from all 8 counties. The Board of Realtors allowed me to give them a flyer along with a presentation that I give to them. And we also put in a half-page ad in the real estate preview this week, which came out yesterday, so I encourage you to take a look at that. Once again, I do extend a sincere thank you for all the businesses that allow us to put in the census awareness material. I've had nothing but open arms for everything I've dropped off and distributed. Friday, I dropped off over 7,000 drink coasters to the local lounges, and they all took them. They were all very, very willing to do so. And lastly, any updates on the actual enumeration itself. The forms will be coming out in approximately 6 weeks, so mid-March, and every form that comes out will be barcoded to that address. Again, Stark County will receive a mailed form if they receive mail at their address, at their residence. If they do not receive mail at their residence and only at a P.O. box, they will not receive a mailed form. What they need to do is wait for a census taker to approach them at their home, or they can go to one of these Be Counted sites and pick up a form, which again, they have not yet been established. We will announce them when we hear where they are. Forms will not be forwarded. So as far as snowbirds, they will not get a form that was mailed to their residents here. It will not be forwarded to them in their southern location. The other 7 counties in our area not receiving, the other 7 counties in our area will not receive a mailed form. The counties are Adams, Billings, Bowman, Dunn, Golden Valley, Hettinger, and Slope. They will be approached by a census taker, and a form will be, if they're not home, a form will be left at their door. That form, again, will be barcoded to that address. Anyone that does not receive or not send back their form, come in May, there'll be a non-response follow-up, and a census worker will try multiple times to reach them. And one good piece of information I came across is that the census taker will then leave a phone number on their door if they're trying to reach them and they can't reach them. That phone number can be called, and then they can set up a time when they would be home. Once again, the census data is used to distribute over $400 billion in federal funding every year. For every one person that's not counted, North Dakota loses $10,000. For every 100 people, that's $1 million. Census data is used by businesses on strategic decisions whether or not to move into our area, which is sources of new jobs. And Census data is also used to draw legislative lines. Now, I am also available for presentations to any businesses or organizations wanting a 5-10 minute presentation on the census. I think we've had great community support so far, and any information we can get out to the general public would be very beneficial. And that is my update, unless you'd have any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Jordine. That's a great update. Any comments or questions by commissioners?
Lori, you're probably way ahead of us on this, but can we do something with utility billing mailings right before census time?
We did have a flyer in the utility billings back, I'm going to guess, I think it was about November, but if we'd be allowed to do it again, that would be great.
I don't know how much trouble that is. I don't know how much effort that is, but
We'd be more than willing to entertain another flyer.
Mrs. Jordine, do you think there's any chance that the Census Bureau will put one of these Be Counted sites on the university campus at all?
My best guess is not, but the way that they're going to approach that, what I was told is that an enumerator is going to be contacting like an RA or somebody that's designated for each dorm, and that is going to be the person that the student drops their form off with. Then the census taker is going to come back and collect the forms. So my best guess is not, but I can certainly ask.
I guess I was thinking about the university students that live off campus and maybe, you know, have changed address once or twice in the year and will likely, I think, be missed on the first go-around with the mailings. And so I was kind of hoping that maybe there'd be a Be Counted site right at the university itself.
You know, that's a very good point, and I will ask them if that's possible. They're still in their just-in-time training, is what they've told me. So any piece of information they kind of get right before that time. And being it's going to be in April, I'll probably find out more information come February and March.
Okay. Well, it sure sounds to me like you're doing a great job getting out and promoting the census. People certainly should be aware that it's coming up here probably in not much more than 60 days. And
Yeah, 6 weeks.
Yep.
Lori, on the oil workers now, the ones that have been staying in the hotels here, some of them have been here more than 6 months. Do you know how you're going to handle that, or?
The Census Bureau is going to be approaching all of the hotels, trying to get information on which rooms they are and if the management will allow that information. I know as far as what we've been trying to do, and I know it doesn't make them fill out the form, but I've approached some of the local hotels with different items that were funded, like decks of playing cards that say U.S. Census Bureau on them, and ice scrapers, and asked them to target the rooms that were oil-related, and they were all, like I said, very willing to do so.
Because I think it's confusing to them knowing that they have a permanent residence somewhere else, but yet they're still here for the 6 months and 1 day, whatever.
Right, and that's going to be our hardest group. And it would be great if I can get into more of the oil companies themselves to present at a staff meeting, you know, just so they understand how they need to be counted.
Okay. I know we have some in rental houses too that I've been contacting too to make sure that they count where they're at now.
Right, and the key is 6 months and a day wherever you live. However, wherever you move, if they move March 15th, if they move to Dickinson, and this is their now resident, they're supposed to be counted here. Anytime up through April 1st. Wherever they live, April 1st.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
We have a 5:30 agenda item. Mr. Kessel, would you introduce?
Certainly. We are blessed to have our library director, Cheryl Tollefson, here, and she has a staff member that she would like to introduce to you as a commission.
Yes, we're really excited. Our newest librarian that has been hired is Michelle Mickey Butts. She is kind of not exactly replacing Leah Calberth, who retired the end of the year. Tina Kuntz, who was the children's librarian, slid into that position. And so we hired a new children's librarian, and that is Michelle Butts. Just basically some of the things that she'll be doing for us as children's librarian is she will be in charge of the children's young adult department of the library, which is about 3,500 square feet on the lower level. She'll be helping library users in that area, children and adults that come down and that need help in that area. And there's adult nonfiction also in the lower level, and she'll be providing reading guidance and so on to all age groups. She's going to be selecting materials for the children's department, books, DVDs, audios. She's also going to be driving the bookmobile on some of our routes. We do go out about anywhere from 12 to 14 days a month, so I expect her to be on the bookmobile as a driver at least 4 days a month. She will be promoting the bookmobile in the satellite stops that we have. Mainly she's going to be handling the Medora route, and so she'll be handling that in an independent manner. That will be her responsibility. She's also going to plan and facilitate programs for children and young adults, a story time, summer reading program, any other new ventures that she'd like to develop. Offering instructions also in the online databases, how to use Odin, the online catalog for the library, magazine indexes, Ancestry.com, the online databases of the car, repair manuals. She's going to encourage productive use of the children's library after school. We get a lot of drop-ins and children coming in after school maybe to do homework, and so we want to make that a good experience and that they can find and get help with what they need and have a safe place to be after school. She'll be setting up displays to organize and encourage reading and other library programs. And then she'll be monitoring the study rooms that are adjacent to her desk. And then helping out in other departments as needed, because we're a small staff, and so if someone goes on vacation, we cover for each other. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Michelle Mickey Butts.
Welcome.
Welcome.
I'm Michelle Butts. I want to thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself. As Cheryl mentioned, Michelle Butts is my name. Actually, most people call me Mickey. I'm a longtime resident of Dickinson, as my parents, Ted and Marie Renner, also are active and longtime members of Dickinson area. I graduated from DHS and DSU. I have a son who is attending DSU. He is student teaching this semester at Dickinson High School, and he had the honor of being the 2009 DSU Homecoming King. I was librarian at the high school for 27 years. Don't do the math. And I retired from that position in May of 2008. And I wanted a career change, so I taught mathematics at the college at DSU for a year and a half. But evidently library was in my blood, so when this opportunity came, I decided to apply to be children's librarian. I'm very excited to be part of the Dickinson Public Library staff. It's my goal to work together with the library staff to continue to provide Dickinson and the surrounding area with the highest quality of informational technical resources. I hope that I'll be a positive asset to the Dickinson Public Library. Thank you again for your time.
Well, once again, welcome.
Thank you.
Is it this is a full-time position? Is it? Well, I was hoping so after all the duties you read through that she was going to be doing. So, yeah. Okay, well, are there any comments or questions by commissioners? Commissioner Steiner, you know what a library is, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was at one once in college.
You were there once, okay.
Just once.
Anything else there?
Yeah, actually, I
Okay.
I actually had a book published. Unfortunately, it's not a children's book, but in the target audience is women my age. So I'd like to present it to the Dickinson City Commissioner, signed copy, so that maybe after I pass away, if it becomes famous, you can sell it on eBay. But at this moment, I'd just like to give it to Shirley to read, probably.
Thank you. Thank you very much. She obviously knows I can read.
Yeah, I noticed she only brought one book. Well, thank you. So, okay, well, we'll move then to the non-timetable agenda. And the first item there under tab 4 is first reading of an ordinance regarding the volunteer fire department pension plan, and we'll have our city attorney, Mr. Colling, present this item.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. The proposed ordinance before you makes a change to the vesting schedule for the volunteer fire department. As you know, the city makes a contribution on behalf of volunteer firefighters to a pension plan, and that pension plan has a lengthy vesting schedule at present. The benefits vest over about 10 years. The change that is proposed is to shorten that so that retirement benefits for the volunteer firefighters would not vest until they have achieved at least 5 years of service. The change here is requested by the fire department and by the volunteer firefighters. The reason for it is that when a volunteer firefighter leaves the service, an actuarial calculation has to be made to determine how much the city is to provide as a retirement benefit, and we send that out to an actuary to make that calculation. And it turned out that when volunteer firefighters had a short time of service of something less than 10 years, or less than 5 years rather, that the cost of the actuarial calculation was more than the benefit that was being provided under the pension plan. So the volunteer firefighters put this together and requested this change so that when somebody has a short time of service, that actuarial calculation would not have to be made. And over time, we feel, volunteer firefighters feel that it will save the pension plan money and provide some security of benefit for the volunteer firefighters when they leave the service as well. So we put that before you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Colling. Any comments or questions by commissioners? Okay. This is the consideration of first reading. Would there be a motion regarding first reading?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
move to approve first reading of ordinance number 1377.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Item B is creation of an ad hoc committee related to recycling. Mr. Kessel, could you introduce that item further?
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. In 2009, the city distributed a survey in the utility bills to try to ascertain the interest level of the residents of the city of Dickinson in recycling. We were very impressed with a number of surveys that were received back by the city. The return rate was about 34%. We were hoping to get around 15%, so we were very excited. The preponderance of the responses are people are very interested in recycling in the city of Dickinson. They want to see us do something, and the level of recycling varies to a great degree. It is evidence to me, looking at the results of this survey, that we should pursue recycling, and which will also allow us to pursue going green, as oftentimes referred to. And I think that a ad hoc advisory committee or group would would serve a great purpose in helping us define better what the expectations are of the public. We know that they want recycling, but there's many ways to propose the city recycle, from single source recycling at the curb to pick up and drop off sites to the items that we actually recycle. The list is quite lengthy of things that we could recycle. So Commissioner Jackson has agreed to chair a committee. He's actually done some work already. I'll commend him for doing so. But he has agreed to chair this ad hoc committee, and I guess I could turn over the floor to Mr. Jackson if he has any further comments.
I think the one thing, correct me if I'm not wrong, if I'm wrong, Sean, we want to put this committee together. That's really the first step. So we want the public to know tonight that if they are interested in serving on this committee, how do we want to do that? Let City Hall,
Certainly.
City Hall contact.
Mm-hmm. They can mail or call or email my office, and I'll be happy to forward those names.
Okay. And as Mr. Kessel said, we're going to really try to be broad in our approach to this and really consider everything that comes down the line in the way of recycling. We want the people on this committee to be ready to use that imagination and creativity, but also to face the business realities that we know we're going to run into as we do this. I think a big part of this effort is probably going to be an awareness effort, because there are a lot of nonprofits doing work in Dickinson right now that I think people don't know about, along with the things that the city is already doing. So it'll be a good effort. We don't want the effort to last too long. It'll be a few months, and probably a relatively small committee, we're thinking. But anybody that's watching the meeting tonight who is interested, please get a hold of City Hall.
Do you know, Mr. Jackson, when you say a relatively small size committee, kind of what you're looking at?
Oh, I'm thinking 5 to 10 people.
5 to 10.
Something like that. So we can move through this and accomplish something.
And Mr. Kessel, what we need to do tonight is just, if we agree with this approach, to pass a motion creating this committee and formally appointing Commissioner Jackson as its chair.
Correct.
Okay. Well, you've heard the report and the motion that would be required, but before we ask for the motion, I'll ask if Commissioner Steiner or Commissioner Dukart have any questions or comments that they would like to offer at this time.
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner.
I would agree that now is the time that we need to do this here, to get into it one step farther, since we did send out those notices and had a response and so on. As Mr. Jackson states, there is going to be a price tag on this, and we can't do it unless we know what those price tags are. So, I think this is just another good step that we're going to be taking for this here. Whichever way it comes down, we got to find that answer. We got to find those numbers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Steiner.
Mr. President, I also have a question for Mr. Kessel. When we did the survey, out of the percentages that came back, how many were willing to pay for it? I know there was different price tags, and of course there's going to be a cost to it, but did we have a certain percentage that were willing? I know they wanted it, but were they willing to pay for it?
There's certainly, I think as Commissioner Jackson mentioned, there is some awareness revolving around recycling that needs to be done. There were some responses that stated things such as, why would there be a fee when we being the city can make money on the products that we sell? And there are times when that would be the case, depending on how we go about. We just sold some recycled cardboard and did make some money on that recycled cardboard. Now, oftentimes that market fluctuates greatly, and G&G, who used to do recycling of cardboard in the city of Dickinson, got out of it because they couldn't make money. So that marketplace is very volatile, and so there may be times when I hate to use the word profit, but a profit could be made on the sale or on the recycled materials. But other times there's simply not going to be the case, and we'll actually lose some money. But is there a benefit beyond dollars to the community for recycling? And I think that's part of the question that needs to be answered at this committee is, what is that benefit, and how much, is there a quantification of that benefit in terms of dollars? Much like a public swimming pool, they don't make money, but the public would like to see those pools operate. So.
Well, I think our trend definitely is the process of recycling many things rather than tearing down and building new. Going green is the way to go, and I'm interested to have them put that together too and see how it goes.
I will distribute the recycling survey results to all of you so that you have them. Commissioner Jackson has them now. We had an intern who put that together, and he puts together some nice graphs. So I can't answer your original question off the top of my head, but it may be found in the documentation that I'll forward to you.
You know, it might be okay, though, to let the public know there were about 1,800 responses to that particular question about recycling, and of the 1,800, approximately 1,300 said they would be willing to pay a monthly fee for recycling. So
That's good. It's 75% or more, right?
Okay. Well, I think Commissioner Jackson is an excellent choice to chair this committee with, you know, his business and engineering background. And I would also encourage him to try recruit some people to the committee that you might be aware of that would have some special interest and expertise in this area. Right now, the chair would entertain a motion that to create the ad hoc recycling committee with Commissioner Jackson as its chair. Would there be such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote on the motion. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. We'll move to tab 7, Public Works, and Mr. Rapp will make a couple of reports.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first one is going to be the Solid Waste Annual Report. Before I get into the report, there's just a few items I'd like to touch in that report, but I'd really like to thank the solid waste staff for the phenomenal job they do. The short time I've been overseeing that department, I had the opportunity to ride with one of the drivers on the routes to see what they face daily, picking up the garbage throughout the city of Dickinson, and also had the opportunity to work on the floor of the Baylor building. To say the least, it was very interesting, but these individuals out at the Baylor building do a phenomenal job. They're working in some conditions that aren't the most favorable at times, but I really want to thank the staff out there for the excellent job that they do. With that, there's a few items I'd like to touch on the solid waste annual report, and then I'll answer any questions at the end. But on the lines of recycling, Commissioner Dukart did touch base. We don't do a very good job of letting people know what we do. Out at solid waste, they do recycle a lot of the cardboard from the commercial establishments. We actually recycle about 270 tons of cardboard since they took over that operation. It is shipped to, I believe, a company in Minneapolis. Through 2009, our profits were about $13,345 is what come into solid waste. Grass and leaves are collected at multiple sites. There's a little over 400 tons of grass and leaves that was picked up and brought out to the solid waste and out to landfill and turned into compost. Out of that compost, we produced 575 tons of compost, and we sold 539 tons. So we're selling almost as much as what we're making. This can be used in yards and gardens, and we've also actually started using that within our cemeteries to improve our landscaping within our cemeteries. We actually collected through recycling areas a little over 11,000 gallons of waste oil that's brought in that doesn't re-enter the environment. That's sold to a local hauler, and it's reused for producing asphalt. We also have appliances delivered out there. We took in about 750 refrigerators, the freons, capacitors, everything hazardous removed out of the refrigerators, and those units are sold for recycled scrap. We've also taken in about 800 and almost 900 white goods, which are stoves and those type of appliances, and brought in, and then they're recycled for scrap iron. Then to date, if the guy looked at the report and stuff too, is our total bale count was actually down for 2009, but we also had a fire out at the Baylor building that basically made that building inoperable for about 6 months, or about 6 weeks. If you add back into what we normally produce on a weekly basis, it added out another 1,800 to 2,200 bales through that facility, which would bring us basically back up to above what was done in 2009. The other thing I'd like to touch base on too is this year with the tornado that happened in the south side of Dickinson, we did open an inert landfill south of town, but in that landfill we hauled out about 1,300 tons of inert material that was put into that landfill that did not enter our existing landfill. And that was besides the trees and everything else we ground up and reused for mulch and stuff. Also, if you take a look at the total incoming tonnage on a yearly comparison over the last 5 years, this also shows the growth that the City of Dickinson has seen over the last few years and stuff. Our material that's entering the landfill is the same as anything else that has a continuous increase. That just shows the population growth that Dickinson has experienced. With that, I guess there's just some of the stuff in the information in the back that goes into the daily and monthly counts. That's the information that the health department needs to submit to them. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Rapp, on the total incoming tonnage, you know, for the 5 years prior to 2009, the tonnage was relatively stable, at least certainly the 4 years prior. But this year, it jumped quite a bit. Is that due to the tornado, or?
Yes, Mr. President. Part of that is would be part of the storm, also, but part of that is growth also.
Growth. Okay.
And I guess if you really take a look at that chart, what President Johnson did allude to does show reflect the storm, and then you take a look at 2005 where we had a little bit of a spike. That was the year that we had the storm that came through with the heavy snowfall in October.
Right.
So these type of events do affect what goes into the landfill.
There was very little change between years 6, 7, and 8, and you know, it would, you know, you would look at that and conclude that we weren't growing as a city during that time, but I believe we were. But why wouldn't have our tonnage grown?
I'm not sure why that would look at. Part of that could be some of the recycling, some of the other things that are being pulled out of the waste stream. I'd have to ask that question to find out exactly why that would be.
I have a question, Mr. President. Skip, could it be because G&G no longer recycles?
That could be part of what we're seeing for the total tonnage, but most of this information in here is actually what's in the landfill. The stuff that's coming, that's being pulled out, that's recyclable and stuff too, would not be what the incoming tonnage is for the landfill.
It's different. And thank you for the tour this morning. It was very educational.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from Mr. Rapp on this item?
Good report.
The other thing, City Administrator Mr. Kessel asked me just to update the City Commission on where we're at with the Armory roof. We have engaged the services of a contractor to basically eliminate the flat roof up at the Armory and take care of the water issues we've had in past years with water dripping into the recruiters' offices and the gymnasium and stuff. The rafters and everything are on order. City engineer Sean Soren has got all the engineering documents and stuff that we need for the rafters. We're probably looking about another week to 10 days. They should be on site, and then they're going to basically get started installing that roof. It will be a multi-pitch roof that'll go up just about as high as the gymnasium roof. We'll install R38 insulation on that roof, which is going to help immensely with our heat loss. That flat roof, rubber roof's got about an R value, about an R10. So that'll help. There'll be 30-year shingles installed, new gutters, and it's going to, the conceptual drawing that was done is going to be a very nice looking building and basically improve the longevity of that building for a long time.
Are you ready for some questions?
Yes.
Are there any questions then or comments regarding the armory? All right, do you have any questions for Mr. Rapp about anything else relating to Public Works? Okay, well,
Thank you.
Thank you. That'll turn us to the City Administrator's Report under tab 8. Mr. Kessel.
Thank you, President Johnson. The first item is a request by Ripley Richards Real Estate Development Services. They're requesting that the City of Dickinson entertain a pilot or payment in lieu of taxes for a development that they are involved with within the city. That development is the Section 8 housing units that we've been discussing at the Commission for some time now. It's the replacement of the 30 that were lost during the tornado and the additional approximately 30 units on top of the 30 lost. I have placed 3 different pieces of information at your desk. They are more related to TIFs than they are pilots, but the programs are somewhat similar. A TIF, or Tax Increment Financing District, is another way of incenting development. A pilot program, the state legislature allows us as a city the opportunity to eliminate or abate taxes or soon-to-be assessed taxes on a project. A project of this nature is bare ground, and it would produce a certain level of taxation. For example purposes only, let's say that taxation is about $85,000. Based on the taxable value and our mill rates, it would produce, let's say, $85,000 in taxes in 2011 after construction is complete. A pilot allows you as a city commission the opportunity to abate all or a portion of those taxes. So you could negotiate with the developer and say, we would like you to pay $40,000 of the $80,000 or $85,000 that's due. There's 2 ways then that $40,000 would get applied. The first way is based on current taxation levels. So the school would get a portion based upon the mills that they are currently charging, same for city, same for county, same for park district. Or the other method is we engage in a written agreement with all the taxing entities that states a distribution formula that's separate from that. Meaning of the $40,000 collected, the commission could say the schools will get 15, the city will get 10, the county will get 5, and so on. If the city commission is willing to engage a discussion regarding pilots, meaning getting into negotiation, we're going to move forward with this, we would need to include a member of the school district or a representative from the school district. They would be an ex officio person who would be involved in the discussions regarding it. So the report tonight is just to simply make you aware that the pilot has been requested. You have before you what they have requested. I do not know at this point what the value of the development will, the final taxable value will be. So I can't tell you how much we would be giving up in terms of taxation. There's 2 ways of looking at a pilot program. Since it doesn't apply to land, it only applies to improvements upon that land. One way of looking at it is the city currently isn't receiving taxes other than land right now, and so anything that would be received would be money ahead. The other way, of course, of looking at that is If we received the true and full value, we'd receive a great deal more than the pilot that could be potentially agreed upon. So I would like to present the letter to you, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try and discuss those. And if the decision is to move forward with the pilot, then I'd be more than happy to make a request of the school district that they have a representative at our next commission meeting to discuss it further.
Mr. Kessel, I have a question. In the second paragraph of their letter, they refer to the previously built Prairie Avenue townhomes. So these are buildings other than what they're proposing to build here, and in a sense it sounds to me like in their letter they're saying we could use this tax break to not only lessen the cost of construction but of the Section 8 housing, but we have some things we'd like to change on these Prairie Avenue townhomes, and we would use the money to do that. Is that what they're saying?
Yes, I believe that's exactly what they're saying. And when you read the language of the statute, it refers to a project. And I guess I would defer to Attorney Coling, but my assumption is that they're defining that project to be the new construction and the renovation of the current buildings that they have. Now, Attorney Coling, do you have any?
Mr. President, my reading of the letter is the same as Mr. Kessel. I think that's what they're intending to do, is to use this as a new homes as well as some modifications or renovations. I'm not sure exactly what of the existing homes, and to incorporate all of that within a project. Depending on how that could be negotiated with the city and the developer and the school district, that appears to be acceptable under state law to define the project that widely, so long as the city and the school district are comfortable with that.
The Prairie Avenue townhomes, did they receive any kind of a tax break from the city?
I don't believe that the Prairie, the ones that they referred to in their letter did, but I can say that the Villard Terrace did receive tax breaks from the city. That project was done a little over a decade ago, I believe, 12 to 15 years ago.
And did that, were those constructed using a pilot, or was some other means for a tax break there?
I believe that TIF financing was used for those, but I would like to double check and make that.
Okay.
Mr. President, they don't get the tax exemption also with this then, do they?
They could. The way that the statute is written, it is a possibility that they could get a tax exemption and a pilot. But that is completely up to the city commission to make those judgment calls.
They have 17 years in here as the duration of the pilot. Is the duration negotiable?
Definitely.
It is, Mr. President. The maximum amount allowed by statute is 20 years from the completion date of the project, but that can be negotiated in any amount. It can be a year, it can be 2 years, 20 years, whichever the commission feels is appropriate.
As well as the percentage increase.
Correct.
So all the terms are negotiable.
That's correct.
What kind of time constraints are we under here?
They would like to have a decision by this board shortly, because it does impact their budgeting and financing of the project. And when I say shortly, I believe that to mean by March. They would like to see the board make a decision one way or the other.
Well, I guess, you know, I'd like us to have more information than what we have now. We'll read through the information that you left at our desk here. But I would like to have a reasonable estimate on size of the total project, what that would likely then be assessed at, and under today's current tax climate, what that would generate in property taxes. And so we have a little more information in terms of kind of negotiating this. I guess initially I'm not opposed to granting some assistance here so that we do get this Section 8 housing. I think it's very much needed in our community, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily in favor of giving away the farm either here to get it. And I'm thinking that my position might be quite a ways away from kind of what they've proposed here to begin with. But I'd like more information before I know I come to a conclusion.
Yeah, I tend to agree. You know, I think we're all acutely aware of the shortage of rental housing in this community and others as far as that goes. And there's certainly an interest on my part in doing what we reasonably can do to encourage that. One of the things I find myself wondering about, this is Section 8 housing. There are already other incentives involved in this kind of construction. We also have a need for rental housing that is not Section 8. So I wonder where we should, you know, which basket we might be putting our eggs in. I'm not sure. You know, I think we have to think about that. You know, we can vary the terms, but do we know, is there any limitation on what a city can do? Is it just to our discretion? Is there some maximum dollar amount, number of projects by state law?
Mr. Jackson, there are not dollar limits in state law that limit the cities.
So it's up to us.
Yeah, it's a matter of negotiation.
Okay.
I too would like to, I'd like to see the amount of the project versus the pilot program versus the tax exemption, all of that, so we could make some decisions after that too.
These projects will be a great addition to our city. You know, there's no question about that. But I know we need rental housing that is not Section 8 as well.
It sounds like to me that the commission is willing to at least entertain the idea of a pilot project. I can certainly invite, contact Superintendent Sullivan so that they have a representative at our next city commission meeting, gather the information that you've requested, and maybe even ask that Ripley Richard also have a representative here to present before you so that you can hear their request firsthand and maybe more about what the development will look like.
I think that would be a good approach.
Okay.
One other thing I'd be interested in knowing, and maybe you answered this, but you know, this is proposed as a 17-year thing. Are we in the midst of any other projects that might be 5 or 10 years old that have a similar term structure?
I believe that the Villard Terrace project is concluded, and there are no further incentives that the city is owed, so to speak.
I think we do have a couple.
Are there others?
Well, with St. Luke's and St. Benedict's, this was before your time, Mr. Kessel, and before Mr. Jackson's and Mrs. Stukart's time on the commission, but we had to deal with St. Benedict request, and it was a tough request for us to deal with because years ago the commission granted a very lucrative deal to St. Luke's, and may have been too lucrative, so it made it difficult for us to kind of deal with the St. Benedict's request. And that's a point that I would like to bring up, that we can't just think about this one kind of in a vacuum. because whatever we do here will kind of be used against us to do for others. Okay, so as important as this is, I think, you know, you have to have some caution on how you approach this. Mr. Kessel and I had the opportunity to meet with a very reputable out-of-community developer here the other day that came into the community and was checking things out, asked for a meeting with Mr. Kessel and I. And in the course of that meeting, even though they didn't really know exactly what they would like to build here, they wanted to know if we were interested in this type of financing. And I gave them the short answer. I told them no, from my point. But the thing is, once you go down this path, and if Dickinson remains in a growth mode, anyone that's building, I think, any kind of multifamily housing is going to ask you about this. So, and I don't know that it would be in our best long-term interest to get involved in too many of these. Now, I think this one you can probably make an argument for that it is different, and it is also related to the tornado, and that makes it a little more different too. But again, I think just as a word of caution, we not only have to judge this one on its own merits, but are we doing some things that, in a sense, commit us to doing this for other projects?
I think income-based properties are totally different than a builder coming in and building and charging full price for a rental too, is what we have to look at.
You know, if you give somebody a tax break and yet they turn around and still charge market-driven rents, then the tax break really hasn't gone to the user, it's gone strictly to the developer. And I'm not so sure, again, that that's in the best interest of the community over the long term. Mr. Kessel?
Do you recall when the St. Benedict's and St. Luke's packages were created or negotiated, initiated? It might be interesting at least to have the details related to that.
Well, I suspect the city assessor can help you out there. I think the St. Luke's one goes back quite a ways, but St. Benedict's, I lose track of time. I would guess we dealt with that. How many years ago?
5 years ago.
5 years ago, roughly. And so, you know, there'll be a record of it in the minutes if you can narrow it down to which meeting or meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Related to that project, a zoning letter has been provided to indicate that the project sites are appropriately zoned for the development as they presented them today. So we are moving forward as best we can on the development cycle to make sure that those projects happen in a timely basis. So if there's no further questions, then the other item that I wanted to report on to the commission was the offer received to purchase the 220 West Broadway building, or oftentimes referred to as the Baker Building. As is the case with any property offer, we convene Assessor Zent, Engineer Soren, and I look at that offer and then make a recommendation to the City Commission on whether or not we feel that that offer is acceptable or not. We're still working through the all of the ramifications of potentially selling that building. We do use that building quite a bit right now for storage, and we're a little wary of allowing the sale without a final decision on the Public Works building. And so we will continue to study that, and hopefully at the next City Commission meeting offer you a recommendation regarding that property. That would conclude my report unless there's any further questions.
Any comments, questions? Mr. Kessel, I too share some concerns about selling that building until we have a firm plan on how we would finance the Public Works building, plus a number of other projects that have floated by us, and I'm thinking about the nearly $10 million project regarding our wastewater treatment area. I think the presentation that we saw on that a few weeks ago was quite compelling, and since the Public Works building and the wastewater treatment upgrades, some of those costs would have to be passed on to our utilities, and perhaps not all, but I mean some. I think we have to work out a comprehensive plan. And we have a number of other projects either ongoing or kind of sitting out on the horizon. And so rather than kind of take them piecemeal, one at a time, I think we need to have a comprehensive kind of financing plan here in place.
Would you suggest then a meeting of the commissioners to review a capital projects review?
I think at the previous meeting when I suggested, we hold an earlier budget meeting, that's primarily the topic I had in mind, was not so much the day-to-day operations. I think we have a pretty good understanding of those, and they're more impacted just by day-to-day inflation and pension liability changes and healthcare changes. But these projects, there's getting to be quite a number of them as possibilities, and I don't think they're going to overwhelm the city, but we have to have a plan, in my view.
I do have one additional thing I'd like to just mention. Our city commission meeting, the next one in February, will be on Tuesday the 16th as opposed to Monday the 15th.
Okay, very good. Any other comments for Mr. Kessel? All right, we'll move to tab 9, and that's accounts payable and payroll. Are there any payables that you'd like to discuss? Not, would there be a motion then to approve the payables and payroll?
I make a motion to approve the accounts payable.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Are there any comments by city commissioners? Not. Are there any comments by the public? If you'd like to address the commission, please step to the podium, state your name, hear your comments. There's no one from the public. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.